Well, good morning, everybody. I wanted to start you off first by looking at some live lightning data early this morning as the storm complexes that yesterday through the plains produced some severe weather, especially in Kansas, continue to progress farther to the east. This has been pretty well predicted, I think, by the models overall, and we're just looking here at kind of the first round through parts of the Midwest today. We're going to keep a close eye on this whole region again later on this afternoon, especially as we see the late afternoon progress of these storms develop a bit farther to the south. I'm quite keen on seeing what we can get in the Ohio River Valley, given how dry it's been there. Of course, that's not the driest spot in the country. We'll talk more about that in just a few seconds, but that's the best potential I've seen for a while to get some rain into this region. But yesterday's storms, just watch these kind of coming off of the mountains in the west, blowing up here in the northern plains. And then we have this system right in through here. There's a frontal boundary parked in this area on which some very large storms erupted last night. And we can see some well-extended anvil shadows here telling us this convection was quite deep. Plus you can see the overshooting tops also indicating pretty intense convection. Before I kind of look at the storm reports from these storms last night, I do want to point out some of the wildfire smoke still coming out of Northern California and Oregon into parts of Idaho. But also there are still wildfires coming out of this part of Canada, Western Canada, spreading some of their smoke farther to the south as well. I did take a look at the stats this morning. We're at about 5.3 million acres burned. That's about a million above the 10-year average, just for some context there. But these storms did pack quite a punch as they came through the midsection of the country with all that smoke behind them. So storm predictions here, let's go back to yesterday's reports. Let's blow this up a bit so we can see it. I'm going to look at the unfiltered reports. Was one tornado reported, but 85 reports of severe both hail and wind damage from this yesterday. If you just take a good look at the newest radar data, we're going to watch a low continue to curl up over parts of the upper Midwest here. To the south, this is where we're really just pushing the frontal boundary right into the most unstable and hot air. It's extremely hot farther to the south along the lower Mississippi River Valley. And as this rain comes through this area, what I'm paying most attention to is, will it be able to kind of make some corrections on what you see here? So let's shrink that up a little bit. There you go. This is the last 14 days of accumulated precipitation expressed as a percent of normal. And so it's great to see some of that rain move through this corridor, because remember, this map is day old. It's always got a day old on it. Here's some of the needed rains in this part of the Ohio River Valley. And then you get into the lower Mississippi River Valley and even parts of the southeast. But a big section of the mid-south has seen a lot of heat and had no precipitation. Now, you know that my big concern going forward is that this area plus farther back to the west in Texas has the greatest risk of flash drought as we watch the pattern continue to evolve. But overall, this is kind of a good look at what our last couple of weeks have done, including, the total precipitation here from Debbie, which in some places is over 500% of normal just over that 2-week stretch. So just a continuation of some of the storylines we've been covering as of late. So early this morning, just a hair before 7 o'clock, we were watching a large area of the lower Mississippi River Valley, including the Delta here, that does have excessive heat warnings in place and surrounded by heat advisories. Outside of that, red flag warnings in parts of Oregon. We're still dealing with the smoke there as well. We just need to continually watch how this is all going to kind of be affected by, I think, some of the bigger tropical things going forward. So I have these questions about filling in those holes in the lower Mississippi River Valley, and what are we going to be able to do about the temperature pattern that's been forecast that seems to be missing pretty often as of late. And we're going to think through the tropics. I think this is going to be a major component of this. So this is the animation this morning. This is infrared data. There's the sunrise. Ernesto is tapping into some very warm ocean water and very little shear, so you can see extremely symmetric storm here, and it's expected to open up a nice clear eye as it moves toward Bermuda. No real changes in the overall track. I would just say that if this hurricane, which will likely become at least a Cat 3 by tomorrow afternoon, if it does move to the west of Bermuda, Bermuda will take the greatest kind of, the most severe side of a hurricane, which would be the right side, the greatest punches on that right side. And that's just a concern for Bermuda. Again, this island, though, given its history with getting hit by hurricanes, is, for the most part, very well designed and structured to be able to handle some of this stuff. Now, that's not everywhere, but I know a lot of the modern construction there is. Just taking a look, though, it'll be fun to watch where this eventually goes, simply because of its ability to get pulled up into this very deep trough of low pressure that continues to form around Iceland and Greenland in the North Atlantic. And it could reinforce the storm systems that will be running across northern Europe, including at some point remnants of it moving its way toward the British Isles here. So we'll need to watch that quite carefully as well. But I'm going to go back to the other pieces to this, which we talked about yesterday, which is going on in the North Pacific. We have a couple of tropical systems, which their remnants could very easily be pulled up into the Gulf of Alaska or into the Bering Sea. It looks more likely the Bering Sea than the Gulf of Alaska going forward. But this is one of the storm systems, and here's the other. And the timing is just a little bit different between each, but this will be important to watch. After this particular one called Ampiel, I think is how you say this, goes toward Japan, how it eventually reinforces the deeper low that's over the Bering Sea right now. I think this is all a critical part of this. So just to show you where I'm talking about, I know it's odd because it's split, but these systems getting into that trough is what I'm thinking about. You can kind of see it over here as well. And what I want to know, we've been asking this question for a while, are the models, whatever, are they consistent with the actual production of this high pressure as we go, out over the next 15 days, which gets us to the end of August? Because we've been questioning that, because if so, it reinforces troughs here and here and a much bigger one there, and that will change the shape of this ridge, which could possibly change where we're most concerned about the risk of excessive heat and also the risk of this flash drought, because the flow will basically go over the top, around, over the top to the south, and then really dig into this area, which will increase the flow very quickly across northern Europe. So that's a 15-day composite map of the average height anomalies, giving us those troughs and ridge positions. Now let's see it in motion. I do want to give you that top-down view again. We can see better that the typhoons we're discussing here, this is the one going close to Japan. As we play this forward, we'll keep an eye on that trough today, tomorrow, as it rolls farther toward the east. This is the one that's initiating the severe storms. But again, it's the same story. Look at the amplitude on this flow coming into the Gulf of Alaska around this trough and then opening up a larger ridge here, which is going to keep the heat around in the southern plains of the United States. Just like we saw previously, getting up there to Monday and Tuesday, there's a little shortwave that'll go to the north of this larger ridge. It's that little wiggle right there that's going to tell us on Tuesday the risk of some storms in the northern plains. And as we play this forward, there it goes right over into the upper Midwest. But overall, have we really changed the pattern yet as the tropical system gets absorbed into this low? Not really. This is where we're going to be by next Wednesday. See the same outlook here. And so this ridge sitting in this spot over the southern plains, I think, is going to be critical to figuring out if it shifts west or east as we get into the end of the month. Because by the time we get to next Friday, out there to Saturday the 24th, there's going to be a few different pieces to this to be watching. The tropical system is absorbed into this upper level trough feature here. We still have something similar to this, but because we've lost the depth of the trough over the east, this ridge begins to open itself up a bit. And if it does, that's going to start to give us a bit more of a drier signal across more acres in the midsection of the country. Plus, what we'll end up getting through the upper Midwest is northwest flow without a trough, without a shortwave to initiate storms, meaning week 2 will likely be a bit more on the drier side for some of the places today, right now, getting rain. And out there beyond this, we're way out here in model La La land, but I see at times maybe that ridge flattening, more troughs rolling across the U.S.-Canada border. And if they are able to do that, that's going to initiate a wet signal for week 2 across the northern tier of the U.S., mainly Montana, maybe the north and South Dakota, but a lot into the Canadian prairie. We'll be looking at a stormy signal for week 2. So with that as the setup, let's walk through all of this. Today's severe weather threat storm predictions, let's see if they updated this. Still the same area that we got a slight risk out. I think it's more of a hail and a straight line wind risk in this region. As we go forward, this would be tomorrow on the 16th, that'd be Friday, and then Saturday pressing farther over toward the Appalachian Mountains where there still remains a marginal risk. I thought the NAM was relatively well initialized again this morning, so let's go and have a look at it. Let's play through the middle of the day. There's the rain moving through Illinois and Indiana, stretching back up over Lake Michigan into Wisconsin, curling into the low. That's right into this part, kind of the northern tier of Minnesota. And so this is tonight. So remember, we're going to watch for the storms again tonight to kind of pop right on that same boundary. So possibly St. Louis, all the way back to like Springfield and Joplin, then getting down over here towards central Oklahoma, toward Norman. That's an area through which I think we could get another round of pretty nasty storms later on tonight, which could have some hail and straight line wind damage. It's not yet known. This is going to be a very challenging forecast to see, even just tonight, where this is going to be. As we play it forward, look at the rain that's coming into parts of the Ohio Valley. Look at the rain that we could be getting maybe right in through this part of the Mid-South, which is desperate for it, given how dry it's been. And I see through Friday midday, Friday afternoon and evening, as that low curls its way up over, where Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, and Lake Superior come together. We could continue to get showers, cooler conditions in this area, but multiple rounds and chances for rainfall in that section of the U.S. right in through here. And the reason why I keep going over this is that shows up on our soil moisture maps as being so very dry. So to get that moisture this morning, through the middle of the day, through this part of Indiana is key. And then to get it down toward the Ohio River and then down to the Mississippi is key as well. Take a look at this part of the southeast. We did see improvements in Nebraska given the rains that just came through yesterday. And overall, we're going to watch this map evolve as we get toward the end of this growing season, when we do want it to get dry at some point, but not quite yet, not mid-August. Okay, from here, let's take a look at our models. We're going to start off with the WPC next 7 days, and you're going to notice some pretty significant differences between the models once again. For example, when you compare the WPC to the artificial intelligence, look at the difference here in the North Plains, getting into the Red River Valley of the North from one model to the next. Much wetter in the artificial intelligence. Models do all agree on the dryness here. That's pretty well seen. And that dryness moving into this part of the lower Mississippi River Valley and at times throughout the southeast. One of the reasons why the southeast threat for kind of daily convection, it's still there but not normally as strong as it could be, is primarily because the Bermuda High has been opened up farther to the east. While tropical systems keep rolling around its edge, we're not pumping that moisture in as easily as we were before. But with troughs coming in the northwest, better chances of precip here. So again, artificial intelligence, look, and this is the 10-day artificial intelligence. So they're really aggressively wet in the Red River Valley of the North, whereas some of the other models are not, like the NBM. I mean, it's saying storms, but this is not nearly as wet. In fact, if you go out there to 10 days, nowhere close to what the artificial intelligence is showing. But again, the rest of this is a bit more consistent. It's a drier hole in Indiana, but I think this is trying to get filled in right now with the rain that's moving across this area. So I think we will be able to get more than what this suggests, which is under a ½ inch for a big part of Indiana. Let's now go look at the European model. This makes a lot of sense to me with the storms coming through here. And that's day 7. This is day 10. Notice the European model is wet up here as well. If we go to the GFS has lately been a bit of an outlier with where it's putting down heaviest precip. So if you notice the 7 day to the 10, very wet through this corridor in the models, or in this model, in the GFS going forward. So I'm going to take a moment and compare the European 10-day probability of an inch. We're going to compare it to the GFS. So we're looking at those wetter corridors. Now this makes sense given the troughs in the northwest. The heavier rains, it's very consistent with itself. In other words, the European model's been wet here and into the northeast. And the AIFS has been wet in these same corridors, leaving the driest air down here farther to the south. So if we look at that and compare it to the GFS, what's interesting is the GFS ensemble resembles a bit more to the European ensemble than the operational models do. What is different, though, is right in through this corridor where the GFS ensemble still has that wetter look right in through here. So I don't know. We're trying to look for something that shows some consistency in the models, and this is just one way by which we can do that. If we go to the drier side of this over the next 10 days, this has been the ongoing story, although this is now expanded up into more of Wyoming and Montana for the risk of drier. And we've eaten away at the size of the area here in the Pacific Northwest, given the troughing that's going to be in place there as to how dry it will be in the Pacific Northwest. So, bigger picture, getting into week 2, will be how the pattern dives in like this, meets the subtropical component of the jet there, the placement of this ridge, the trough that's over the east, and anything coming out of the tropics. And what's interesting is right now, as we work out there to the 25th, and remember, it's after the 25th I'm watching carefully in the tropics, there seems to be some sort of upper level ridging in this area. Now that's upper level ridging. That's different from the surface ridging that can push those storms around. But as it stands, what this does is this would open up a corridor here for strong to severe storms, and then we'd be drier in a region here. In fact, maybe drier even farther to the south, all the way on the eastern side of that ridge axis. I think that's why you see the week 2 forecast looking quite consistent, right? The CPC and the European and the GFS all showing that same corridor with more storms in the northwest, more storms in the Canadian prairie being forecast. So I like the consistency we're now starting to see if the models do have this pattern right once we get out there to about the 25th of the month. Okay, what about the temperatures? Because the beginning of August has been quite cool in the midsection of the country where the heat has stayed into the southeast, the southern plains, and then getting over here into the western United States following a very hot July. So this cooler weather, how soon will it be replaced? Let's have a look. This is the new National Digital Forecast Database forecast for Thursday. High temperatures getting into Friday. We've watched all week long the risk of this heat just sticking around in southern parts of the plains, Oklahoma and Texas. 103 degrees in Amarillo still being predicted. That's Sunday into Monday. And you're going to notice out there to Tuesday and Wednesday, the models did a very good job at picking up on the return of that cooler air in place here. But remember, it's next week. It's next week after Wednesday that there's some concern we're going to start to open up to more warmth in the plains, pushing farther to the east. So as it stands, the day 5 through 10 still has a cooler signal here and a cooler signal on the west coast. And the reason for that is that this ridge is primarily being left out here, maybe right along the front range of the Rockies, whereas a broader trough is a part of a low that's going to curl up into eastern Ontario and western Quebec through much of this upcoming weekend and beyond. So that's why we get this cooler signal the next week. But the models have been trying to push that warmth back into the midsection of the country. And what's interesting is, yesterday, this is how the European solution looked for day 10 through 15. But the new European solution, look, that's day 5 through 10, very consistent with the GFS. But the new European solution is actually a bit warmer the farther out we go. I think the reason for that is because of the placement of this ridge. So you can see the flow coming in. It's really opened up to a broader section here of the country, possibly getting more of that warmth back farther toward the Mississippi Valley than it was forecasting earlier. So I'm just looking for some consistency here in the models with respect to both their precip and their temperature patterns as we see this particular ridge opening up at this time. Honestly, the top thing I'll be watching is to know if that ridge axis is really going to be here or if at times it will show up in the models going back farther to the west. That's my bigger concern. More on that, I think, as we get into Friday and then see the weekend model trends. Okay, that brings me to this. Let's come back to a quick understanding of what's going on with this tropical season. Again, now through the 25th, we're going to progress in the MJO through phase 1, 2, and 3. And as we get out there to phase 4 and 5, that is a signal to just take the lid off, change the shear profile over the Atlantic. And what we're expecting is at that point around the 25th to start seeing more development coming out here. In the meantime, it's Ernesto, and I don't see anything else developing after Ernesto, at least the models don't either. It's going to be, once we get that MJO progression to occur, that the atmosphere is going to just make more conducive a scenario for this region to start to produce systems. And I showed you this yesterday, but it's just consistent. The end of this month, so the 21st to the 27th, watch this area, and then really the 28th through September the 3rd, I think that will be a time period of which we'll really have to keep an eye on the Atlantic for the potential generation of multiple storm systems. The atmosphere is just becoming more conducive to that occurring. Now, you know that I've been asking big questions of the longer range models because over the next 30 days, we've seen a continual forecasting of higher pressure here. And I've made the point that if we do end up getting higher pressure there, the model will be consistent with hotter and drier conditions in the central part of the United States. Those two things are linked. They're also connected to the higher pressure that's north of the Bermuda High here. In other words, it's stronger on its northern side. Now, the models have been consistent with that, and I just want to show you the GFS is even more aggressive. I know I don't often show you this, but the GFS has an extended outlook as well. This one goes out to mid-September, and it's very aggressive on this. So the resulting temperature and precipitation patterns in the GFS, before we go back to the European, look something like this. Very dry throughout the center part of the United States. Now we know that this is going into mid-September, and the wild card here is that, there's going to be something at that point over the next 30 plus days brewing in the Gulf that's going to come up in here. I just think there's a high probability of that occurring. These models aren't designed to find that, all right? But I want to show you the consistency between the GFS and the European model with the precipitation pattern. So let's go back to the US view first and let's look at the 30 day. So see the drier risks in this same area. So I think that's going to be top of mind to watch as we go forward, is what does it look like in terms of rapid drought development across the south, and do we finally see some drier days setting up for much of the Midwest after what's been a cool and relatively wet start for some to August, following a very wet July for the main parts of the Corn Belt here. I think that's going to be the big question to be answered. So beyond that, I do want to just take a quick global look here. With all of the storm systems curling up around Iceland, how much activity do we get across Northern Europe will be a big question. Will this leave this part of Russia and Ukraine drier? Possibly. Very wet throughout India. Big monsoonal surges still going on here. Wet in Southeast Asia, still wet. Shandong, North China Plain, Manchurian Plain. Australia getting much needed precipitation in its western side here, Western Australia, even north of Adelaide, getting into New South Wales, Victoria, looking at some decent precipitation out of this pattern. But thinking about South America, I just want to point out that the new 45-day outlook, while it is showing some signs of life of normal monsoonal rain behavior coming into the northeastern part of Australia, much of southern Mato Grosso do Sul, Sao Paulo, Goiás, down here toward Paraná, still looking relatively dry, meaning we could see a lot of September go by with not a lot of planting progress. But October is the key month. We'll have to keep watching that as we go forward. So the last thing I want to tell you about is just we're getting better and better evidence that there's going to be this nice prolonged easterly wind surge, or I call them wind bursts. And that is going to really start to give us a better and better look that La Niña could be developing in fall. I've made the case all summer long that it's been these epicenters of heat in the North Pacific and North Atlantic that have been driving things. But as we progress toward fall, if these trade winds really start to get going, it's going to change where the MJO lives. It may live more here at times. And that can change the way we transport momentum and heat out of the tropics and start to bust up where we've seen these big epicenters of high pressure sitting on top of hot ocean temperatures. So I think we need to watch this carefully, because if that easterly wind burst, this one right here, really starts to do what it normally does, you'll get more of a kind of upwelling signal out of this cooler water in early August that's sitting here, that spent all of June and July developing. And if that gets to the surface, we'll actually start to have a real conversation about La Niña and its influence. So that is what's going to be top of mind for me and what I'll be watching. So one more video tomorrow, and then we'll take a quick break over the weekend and catch back up on Monday. So have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk then. Thanks.